The silence between the distant explosions was almost deafening. Eli shifted his weight on the scorched metal floor, the remnants of what was once a sprawling starship, now nothing more than twisted girders and sparking conduits. He glanced around the wreckage like a nervous kid at a school dance, unsure whether to stay or run, but knowing either choice had its own risks. His armor was scratched, his breath ragged, but somehow his spirits remained stubbornly intact. Well, if this is what they call a peaceful retreat, I'm not signing up for the next one, he muttered, wincing as a stray spark sizzled near his boot. From the corner of his eye, a movement caught his attention. There she was, the alien woman he'd spotted before, standing with the grace of someone who had seen a few too many wars and wasn't about to pretend she hadn't. Her ears, long and elegant, flicked like antennae, catching sounds Eli couldn't hear. He wanted to say something clever, but all he managed was, hey, you lost too, or just making this your new vacation spot? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted her head, eyes narrowing in that way that suggested she was mentally cataloging him as either a threat, a snack, or perhaps both. Eli forced a crooked smile, deciding that if he was about to die, it might as well be with a little dignity. Name's Eli, human. I'm not great at first impressions, but I'm working on it. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. Lyra, she said finally, voice cool but not unkind. Alien, also lost. Your planet's destruction is impressive, if unintentionally comedic. Comedic? Yeah, well, we're full of surprises, like this charming introduction. Eli kicked a loose piece of metal, sending it clattering into the shadows. So what brings you to this lovely scrap heap? A foolish mission, and perhaps curiosity about the human who seems intent on surviving against all odds. Lyra replied, stepping closer, her long ears brushing her shoulder. You are different from the others. Eli chuckled. Well, I do have my moments, like the time I accidentally ordered a dozen space burritos and survived on regret alone. She raised an eyebrow. Space burritos? Yeah, it's a thing. Not recommended for first dates or last meals. He grinned. Anyway, if we're both stuck here, maybe we can stop trying to kill each other for a while. Call it a truce? Lyra considered, then nodded slightly. A temporary alliance, until the war claims us or we find a way off this floating junkyard. Sounds fair. I'm guessing you don't have a ship that runs on hopes and bad decisions? Not currently. Her smirk was faint but real. What about you? Just a patched-up engine, questionable wiring, and the kind of stubbornness that probably should be illegal. They settled into an uneasy companionship, sharing stories between cautious glances. Eli talked about Earth, a chaotic, noisy place filled with clumsy humans who wore mismatched socks and still managed to blow things up spectacularly. Lyra shared fragments of her world, where honor was everything, and long ears marked a lineage of warriors who valued loyalty above all. At one point, Eli asked, So, how do you keep your ears so, majestic in the middle of a war zone? Mine are more scared rabbit than regal alien. Lyra laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze. I suppose practice and a good skincare routine. Noted. I'll add that to my survival guide right after don't stand in front of exploding things. Eli grinned, then caught himself. Guess we're both lucky to be alive. Or unlucky, depending on how you see it. Lyra's eyes softened. Perhaps we are neither. Perhaps we are exactly where we are meant to be, if only for a moment. Eli nodded. Yeah, maybe this scrap heap is the start of something less explosive. As the distant thunder of battle resumed its relentless rhythm, they shared a look that spoke of unspoken promises. Two souls adrift in the vast coldness of space, finding warmth in an unlikely place. Family, Eli said quietly. That's what I want. Maybe even with you. Lyra's long ears twitched, her gaze meeting his with something raw and unguarded. Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering like stars against the dark. Then we will be family, soldier. Even if the universe insists on tearing us apart. And for a fleeting heartbeat, the war faded, leaving only the fragile hope of connection, a whisper against the void. They didn't speak much as they walked, side by side, over the mangled deck of the wrecked cruiser. The floor trembled now and then with distant shock waves, as if the planet beneath it still hadn't decided whether to finish crumbling or just politely disintegrate. Eli occasionally glanced at Lyra, who moved with the cautious elegance of someone expecting an ambush behind every piece of twisted bulkhead. He, on the other hand, moved like someone who had long accepted that his next step might kill him and simply hoped it didn't happen before lunch. "So," Eli said, hopping over a fallen beam, "what exactly does an elite alien warrior eat when she's not slicing her enemies in half or brooding over the ashes of civilization?" "Mostly things you would find unpalatable," Lyra replied without looking at him. "Fermented stalk root, raw crecto meat, pickled flarn tendrils." "Sounds delicious," he said, trying not to gag. "Any chance you have snacks that don't smell like regret and betrayal?" "There is a ration bar in my pack. It has been there since the last moon cycle. I believe it is now classified as a geological artifact." "Perfect," Eli said. "I've always wanted to eat something older than my last paycheck." They paused beside a half-collapsed bulkhead. Lyra knelt and activated a small scanner from her belt, its holographic screen flickering with alien glyphs. Eli leaned in to watch, pretending he understood any of it. "So what are we scanning for? Life forms, treasure, vending machines?" "Power signatures," she said. "There is a signal not far from here, possibly a distress beacon, or a trap, or a malfunctioning toaster." "I've been betrayed by worse," Eli muttered, stretching his neck. "Lead the way, Commander Longears." Lyra arched a brow. "Is that meant as an insult or a term of endearment?" "Oh, definitely endearment," he said. "I only insult people I plan to shoot." "Good," she said, standing. "Then I shall refrain from shooting you as well." They advanced through the remains of the corridor, stepping over exposed cabling and shattered armor plating. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was something deeper, almost meditative, like the rare peace before a storm. Eli couldn't help but notice how naturally their pace matched, how Lyra would subtly adjust her stride when he limped, never acknowledging it, but never ignoring it either. At one point, Eli tapped the side of his helmet. "You know, we could probably call for help if I hadn't accidentally poured energy drink into the comms port. It's a long story, but it starts with, 'I was trying to impress a girl,' and ends with, 'Never do that again.'" Lyra gave him a long look. "How are you still alive?" "Mostly luck," Eli said. "Partially stupidity, and a small percentage of me is fueled by spite." They found the source of the signal inside what had once been the ship's infirmary. A flickering console pulsed weakly, casting a soft blue glow across the room. Lyra stepped forward, examining it with clinical precision. Eli hung back, poking around the scattered remains of medical equipment, most of it half-melted or suspiciously sticky. "Any chance this thing can get us off the planet?" he asked, gesturing at the console. "Not directly," she said, "but it is relaying an encoded message. Something old, buried, possibly from another war." "Great," Eli said, picking up a syringe and then instantly regretting it. "Let me guess. It tells us exactly how doomed we are in several poetic languages?" "Something like that," Lyra murmured. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "There is a name encoded in the signal. Yours." Eli blinked. "That's not creepy at all. Are you sure it's mine? There's a lot of Elis in the galaxy. It's a very common name among people who make bad life choices." "It is your military ID," Lyra said. "And a second name, Elara." His smile faltered. He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "Elara was my sister. She died in the first wave of the war." "I'm sorry," Lyra said, and there was a weight behind her voice that made the silence settle deeper around them. She was better at all this, fighting, surviving, making sense of chaos. He exhaled slowly. "If she left something behind, I want to know what it is." "Then we find the source," Lyra said simply. They left the infirmary and followed the signal's trace, weaving through the skeleton of the ship as if guided by invisible threads. Along the way, Eli managed to trip twice, get zapped by a live wire, and startle a nest of mechanical scavenger drones that seemed personally offended by his existence. Lyra handled them with quiet efficiency, and afterward, Eli offered her the title of Queen of Not Dying. "You seem different," she said as they paused at a sealed hatch. "Less afraid." "Yeah," he said. I guess being around someone who knows what they're doing has that effect. Plus, if I die now, at least it'll be in style. Lyra smirked. You humans find humor in everything. We have to, Eli replied. Otherwise, we go mad. Or worse, boring. They forced the hatch open together, revealing a small room with a single chair and a screen still active after all this time. Lyra approached first, scanning for traps. Eli followed, eyes fixed on the display, where a message scrolled in familiar script. It was a recording, a voice transmission, and when it played, the sound of Alara's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, it began, then you found me too late, but not everything's lost. I left something behind. Not a weapon, not revenge. Something better. Eli closed his eyes, letting her voice wash over him. Lyra stood beside him, silent and unmoving, and for a moment, surrounded by ghosts and war and secrets, the strange peace between them held. The room smelled faintly of scorched ozone and old regrets, the kind of scent Eli had grown far too familiar with over the last few years. He stood there frozen as the recording of Alara's voice looped a second time. Her words were calm, determined, laced with the same sharp clarity he remembered from their childhood. Somewhere between the war reports and the calls for unity, there was the tiniest hint of laughter, like she'd known how absurd everything had become. Lyra leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, one long ear twitching thoughtfully. Your sister had good articulation, she said after a moment, and emotional restraint, unlike someone I know. Eli blinked and looked at her. Hey, I cry very selectively, mostly during tragic movie endings and when I stub my toe, sometimes simultaneously. Lyra's lip twitched. The message, she mentions coordinates, a location under the planet's surface, and something she called the lattice. Does that mean anything to you? Eli scratched his chin. Vaguely. I think it was a theoretical construct, some kind of interspecies neural link project. Big science, lots of wires, probably violated a few dozen intergalactic privacy laws. And your sister was involved. She was one of the lead techs, said it could connect minds across species, build trust faster than diplomats ever could. He hesitated. They called her idealistic. I think they meant naive. Or visionary, Lyra said quietly. Perhaps this lattice is why we were drawn here. That or fate's got a twisted sense of humor, Eli muttered. Which tracks? They left the room in silence, the faint echo of Alara's final words lingering in their minds. Navigating the wreckage became more difficult as they descended toward the old infrastructure. The corridors grew narrower, older, less ship and more something else. Lyra's scanner began to ping erratically. This section predates the cruiser, she murmured. These materials are not human, or from my world. Ancient alien tunnels under a war-torn planet? I feel like we just walked into one of those forbidden archaeology documentaries that always ends with someone getting possessed. That is a possibility, she said with unsettling calm. Comforting. Glad I brought my anti-ghost socks. They eventually reached a sealed hatch, so old it looked fused to the surrounding wall. Lyra tapped her fingers against the surface, then activated a pulse key from her belt. A burst of harmonic light shimmered along the edges. The hatch groaned like it was remembering how to be a door, and reluctantly opened. Beyond was a vast chamber filled with silent machines, towering pylons of silver-threaded crystal rising like stalagmites. A soft hum resonated in the air, vibrating faintly in Eli's bones. In the center was a console surrounded by a spider web of conduits that glowed faintly with blue-white energy. Lyra approached it with reverence, while Eli poked a small blinking panel nearby. It beeped at him. Don't touch that, she said without turning. I wasn't touching. I was investigating. With my finger. Exactly. He sighed dramatically but backed away. This is the part where something either lights up and welcomes us, or explodes and eats our memories. Lyra touched the console, and immediately the chamber responded. Lights flickered to life in sequence, and the pylons pulsed with synchronized energy. A projection appeared above them, suspended in midair, an elegant lattice of lines and nodes that expanded outward like a growing brain. This is it, Lyra whispered. A living network. It looks like a bowl of cosmic spaghetti, Eli said, which, to be fair, might be the smartest spaghetti in the galaxy. A soft voice filled the room. Ilara's again, but this time speaking in a different cadence, more formal, as if addressing an audience rather than a brother. If you're seeing this, then the lattice is still active. That means hope is still possible. The war wasn't supposed to end like this. We thought we had time. We always think we have time. Lyra turned to Eli, her gaze steady. This could change everything. If we activate it fully, we may be able to broadcast a peace signal directly into the minds of combatants. It would bypass language, fear, propaganda. Peace through psychic conference calls? That's either genius or the plot of a very weird comedy. It is better than continuing this endless cycle. Eli walked toward the projection. He stared at one node glowing brighter than the others. So, how do we turn it on without frying our brains? There are two key interfaces, Lyra explained, designed for dual input. One must be human, the other, not. Eli looked at her. You're not going to ask me to hold hands and chant, are you? Number, just don't panic if your brain tingles. That's reassuring. They placed their hands on adjacent consoles. The machines responded instantly, tendrils of light curling upward like vines seeking the sun. Eli felt a warmth surge through his mind, not burning, but probing, curious, like an invisible librarian leafing through the pages of his thoughts. He saw flashes, memories not his own, a world of crystalline forests, Lyra's childhood, her training, the day she was forced to abandon her homeworld. Then his own memories surfaced, laughing with Ilara, running through rain, the quiet nights in bunkers with nothing but static on the comms. Their eyes met as the connection deepened. For a moment, the room vanished, and they stood in a shared mind space, a vast field beneath unfamiliar stars. No war, no wreckage, just the strange stillness of understanding. You see me, Lyra said. I see you, Eli replied. We're not so different, except your ears could pick up radio. She smiled faintly. And your jokes are deeply unfortunate. When the connection faded, the chamber pulsed with renewed light. The lattice was alive. Signal broadcasting, Lyra said, checking her scanner. Initial feedback, promising. No signs of hostility from the outer skirmish zones. There's hesitation, confusion. Listening. Eli let out a low breath. We actually did something good. For once, she said. They stood there, in the heart of an alien machine that was older than both their civilizations, trying to decide what came next. The war might pause, or it might return stronger than ever. But for now, there was quiet. And in the quiet, Eli said, Hey, Lyra. Yes? If we survive all this, you think we could get one of those cosmic spaghetti nodes to play music? I've got a killer playlist. She shook her head. Human absurdity. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is, she said, but it is also endearing. A soft voice filled the room. Ilara's again, but this time speaking in a different cadence, more formal, as if addressing an audience rather than a brother. If you're seeing this, then the lattice is still active. That means hope is still possible. The war wasn't supposed to end like this. We thought we had time. We always think we have time. Lyra turned to Eli, her gaze steady. This could change everything. If we activate it fully, we may be able to broadcast a peace signal directly into the minds of combatants. It would bypass language, fear, propaganda. Peace through psychic conference calls? That's either genius or the plot of a very weird comedy. It is better than continuing this endless cycle. Eli walked toward the projection. He stared at one node glowing brighter than the others. So, how do we turn it on without frying our brains? There are two key interfaces, Lyra explained, designed for dual input. One must be human, the other, not. Eli looked at her. You're not going to ask me to hold hands and chant, are you? Number, just don't panic if your brain tingles. That's reassuring. They placed their hands on adjacent consoles. The machines responded instantly, tendrils of light curling upward, like vines seeking the sun. Eli felt a warmth surge through his mind, not burning but probing, curious like an invisible librarian leafing through the pages of his thoughts. He saw flashes, memories not dead, the sound bouncing off ancient walls, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't echo back with sorrow. The light of the lattice still flickered above them, threads of shimmering information pulsing gently in the air, like a heartbeat trying to remember its rhythm. Outside, the battlefronts had stilled. Intercepted transmissions reported a lull in aggression, as if soldiers on both sides had suddenly remembered they were people first, enemies second. Eli stared at the main pylon, rubbing his temples like it might help massage meaning into the moment. So, we just rewired the brains of a few thousand soldiers. Did we accidentally invent therapy? Lyra didn't look up from the console. Therapy implies long-term emotional work. This was more of an emergency empathy upload. I still think we deserve an award, or at least a sandwich. Focus, she replied, tapping several glyphs with fingers, too fast for him to follow. The broadcast is stable, but the power cells here are ancient. They were never meant to handle sustained transmission. You're saying the Hope machine is running on fumes? I'm saying that if we don't find a stable power source within the next 7 hours, the lattice will collapse, and whatever fragile harmony we've seeded out there will vanish faster than your tactical competence. Eli snapped his fingers. Ouch! That was a good burn. Can you teach me how to insult people like that in your language? There are entire schools for it. Their banter evaporated as a low tremor rippled through the chamber. Dust floated down from above, and the crystalline structures quivered like tuning forks. Lyra's head jerked up. That was not geological. I'll go out on a limb and guess not geological means bad. It means someone's here. Eli turned toward the entrance, unslinging his rifle with all the enthusiasm of a man who knew how little it actually mattered when diplomacy failed. Okay, do we think it's your people, my people, or door-to-door salesmen with death rays? The answer arrived in the form of a distant mechanical shriek, too synthetic for a beast, too furious for a drone. A few seconds later, a scout drone zipped into the chamber, its camera lens whirring as it focused on them. Then it beeped an alarm and zipped back the way it came. Well, Eli said, either we just scared it, or it ran off to tell the others that the weird couple in the basement is fiddling with alien tech. Lyra didn't answer. Her fingers danced across the console again, rerouting power toward defense nodes embedded in the walls. Long dormant emitters began to hum. Please tell me those are shields. Plasma arcs, short range, not strong, but better than sarcasm. You wound me. My sarcasm is devastating. Your sarcasm is like a wet sponge thrown during a meteor strike. A warning klaxon blared from the lattice system, 3 distinct pulses, then silence. Lyra's eyes narrowed. They're sending a strike team. Unknown origin, non-affiliated armor signatures. Third-party scavengers? Possibly mercenaries. Possibly worse. Eli cracked his knuckles. I always knew we'd end up getting shot at over a metaphor for unity. The chamber's ceiling groaned. Lyra activated the defensive nodes. A faint shimmer rippled around the pylons, and the air tasted faintly of static. Just as the first breach charge detonated above them, Eli pulled Lyra behind a console. Figures dropped in through the smoke. Black-armored, visors opaque, weapons drawn. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. They opened fire. Plasma hissed against the shields. Eli popped up and returned fire, not aiming to kill, just to stall. They're not talking. That's a bad sign, right? They're here for the lattice, Lyra shouted. They don't need us. We're collateral. That's a lovely word for target practice. She tossed him a charged sphere. Throw this at the western pylon base, now. Eli didn't argue. He lobbed the sphere with a perfect arc honed by years of chucking grenades and very uncooperative ration packs. The sphere burst in a flare of light, and the western pylon surged with energy, releasing a shockwave that knocked half the intruders off their feet. Lyra seized the moment. She leapt over the console, moving like a dancer with a vendetta. Her staff snapped out from her back harness and extended with a crackle of blue energy. She struck with precision, disabling, disarming, dislocating. Eli, from his slightly less graceful position behind a pylon, tried to help by not shooting her by accident. Remind me never to annoy you on your birthday, he muttered. Together they drove the attackers back. A final pulse from the lattice disrupted their comms, forcing a retreat. One of them paused just long enough to fire a parting shot at the main conduit. The beam sliced cleanly through a power relay. Sparks erupted. The lights flickered. The hum of the lattice dimmed. Lyra raced to the damage. Her fingers trembled as she examined the severed line. It's no good. The internal grid can't handle this. We'll need an external power core to reboot. Eli knelt beside her. I saw an energy depot outside the cruiser wreck. There was an auxiliary unit, intact, last I checked. That's nearly a kilometer on foot. Fast feet, slower sarcasm. I'll go, she said, standing. He grabbed her wrist. You stay here. If this place gets attacked again, you're the only one who knows how to fix it. I'll go. She looked at him long and hard. You're not a soldier anymore. I'm not, but I'm still family. And that's a job that comes with running towards stupid things so you don't have to. She hesitated, then nodded once. Take the back tunnels. Avoid detection. Don't get shot. Yes, I read the manual. He grabbed his gear and jogged toward the exit, pausing only to look back once. She stood beside the wounded lattice, bathed in its dim light, long ears twitching with each sound from above. He gave her a thumbs up and vanished into the tunnel. As the lattice flickered behind her, Lyra allowed herself the smallest smile. I will hold the line, she whispered, and in the dark, ancient chamber full of alien technology and fragile hope, the echo sounded like a promise. The air in the tunnel tasted like old metal and forgotten secrets, the kind of place where your own footsteps sound like someone else's. Eli moved fast, counting corners, weapons tight against his chest. His mind, however, was back in the chamber, back with her. The depot wasn't hard to find. The hard part was the 3 six-legged scavenger drones guarding it like it was the last piece of chocolate in the galaxy. He crouched behind a melted support beam and watched them clank in sad circles, occasionally bumping into each other like confused beetles with identity issues. You'd think with all their tech, someone could program these things to walk in a straight line, he muttered. He waited for a gap, then sprinted. One drone pinged an alarm, but instead of engaging, it slipped on a pool of coolant and face-planted into the wall. Eli gave it a salute as he passed. Graceful as ever, boys, never change. The auxiliary power core was still nestled in its cradle, surprisingly undamaged. Eli lifted it, grunting under its weight. He had carried heavier, sure, but never while dodging drones and philosophical questions about cross-species emotional entanglement. The trip back was less eventful, unless you counted the moment when he tripped over a root and landed face first in alien moss. He arrived at the chamber bruised, covered in plant slime, and very proud of the fact that he was still alive. Lyra didn't even blink. You smell like fermented tree bark. It's a new cologne, called Desperation. She helped him slot the core into the system. With a soft chime, the lattice surged back to life, light crawling across its spires like morning breaking over a sleeping city. It pulsed once, twice, and then began transmitting again, spreading its empathic resonance outward. Data flooded the system, reports from all over the front lines, messages of troops laying down weapons, medics walking unchallenged through battlefields, commanders ordering ceasefires instead of strikes. The lattice was working. They stood together, not speaking, just listening to the quiet hum of hope. Then a new signal blinked across the interface, a secure line, a high-ranking Soren officer. Lyra's breath caught. It's her, my sister. Eli stepped back, letting her take the call. The hologram formed slowly, an elegant woman with similar features, long ears, and an expression like steel draped in velvet. Commander Lyra, she said, your signal was unexpected. So is your company. Lyra's tone stayed even. This is Lieutenant Elias Marlowe. Without him, the lattice would still be silent. Humans make unpredictable allies. Eli grinned. We also make excellent pasta. You should come over sometime. Lyra stifled a smile. Her sister didn't. I suppose we must reconsider our biases. Your data confirms the empathy resonance is real. Our fleet has stood down. Yours? Eli checked his wristband. My people are confused, but in a good way. like when they first tasted blue milk and didn't die. Then perhaps peace is no longer an illusion. The call ended, but the weight of it lingered. Lyra turned to Eli. You've done more than most in this war. I did it for the heroism and the snacks. He tried to sound casual, but his eyes searched hers. She didn't look away. You asked me once what family meant to a Soren, she said. It means chosen bonds. It means standing beside someone when every instinct tells you to run. He stepped closer. Then I choose you. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but something brighter. She raised one hand to his cheek, the other resting over his chest, where his heart still beat far too fast for someone standing still. I choose you too, Elias Marlowe. A pause, then. But I'm still better at aiming, he laughed. I'll let you have that one. But I'm better at naming things. Lattice? Really? I will ignore that insult for the sake of interspecies unity. They turned to the lattice together, watching as the signal grew stronger. Messages poured in, leaders agreeing to negotiate, soldiers asking to reunite with families, even enemies sharing stories over static-filled channels. The galaxy wasn't healed, not yet, but the infection had finally stopped spreading. A quiet settled between them again, not the heavy silence of before, but the kind of quiet you find in a room full of old books, or the space between stars. Later, on the surface, they stood amid the ruins. The air smelled different now, less of ash, more of promise. A Soren ship landed nearby, flanked by human transports. Diplomats and warriors alike disembarked, blinking at one another like confused houseguests. I guess this is where the boring work begins, Eli said. Talks, treaties, compromise. Probably forms. Yes, and very bad coffee. They watched as their people began to mingle, tentatively, cautiously, but without weapons. He turned to her, brushing a strand of yellow hair from her face. Do we get an epilogue? Or is this it? She leaned in, forehead against his. This is the beginning. Behind them, the first joint council banner unfurled in the wind. It read in both languages, We are not the same, and that is why we belong together. They didn't need to say anything after that. The galaxy had changed, and so had they.